Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning for our fellow in Oslo and IRENA colleagues in Abu Dhabi. Welcome to the launching talk titled Renewable Energy Outlook and the Challenge on Investment in ASEAN during COVID-19 pandemic. Let me introduce myself. My name is Nadila Shani. I'm the moderator for today's webinar that will guide you through the whole discussions. I'm the Modeling Policy and Planning Technical Officer in ACE. I'm very pleased that today we have a quite big crowd. I would like to inform you that we have almost 830 registrants. So I hope that we will have a very fruitful discussions today. Okay, next. Okay, next. Yeah, just before starting the webinar, I would like to convey some information about the agenda. Today we have two introductory notes from our Executive Director, Dr. Nuki Agia Utama, and then the second is His Excellency Morten Hopland, Ambassador of Norway for ASEAN. And we have three sessions that will be delivered by first Ms. Badaria Yusiana from IRENA. Second is Dr. Roman Fakulchuk from NUPI. And the last is Dr. Zulfikar Yurnedi from ACE. And then we will follow with the Q&A discussions and the closing statements. I just want to mention that you can type your questions if you have any during the webinar in the questions tab, and we will mention several and pick several questions to be asked during the webinar. But later on, we will answer all the questions that is written in the tab. So please, if you have questions later, just type it in the question panels. And please also mention to whom your questions are intended to. Okay, next. Yeah, without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Nuki Agia Utama, our Executive Director, to deliver his first note. The time is yours, Pak.
Thank you, Mbak Sani. His Excellency Morten Hopland, the Ambassador of Norway for ASEAN, Ms. Badaria Yusiana, Program Officer of Southeast Asia International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, Dr. Roman Fakulchuk, Senior Research Fellow, Norwegian Institute of International Affairs, NUPI, colleagues from ACE and from ASEAN. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all, and also, of course, good morning for colleagues from Norway. On behalf of ASEAN Center for Energy, I'm pleased to welcome all of you here today in ACE launching talk, Renewable Energy Outlook and the Challenge on Investment in ASEAN during COVID-19 pandemic. This event is organized under the initiative of ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, or we call it ASEP, and supported by Sustainable Energy, Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Conservation, REE, and Modeling and Policy Planning, or MPP, department in ACE. I also would like to express my appreciation to IRENA and NUPI for their participation, sharing perspective, and also insight with us. Ladies and gentlemen, under the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APAC, ASEAN have committed to aspirational target of 23% renewable energy in total primary energy supply, or TPS, by 2025. However, the unexpected and widespread of COVID-19 crisis posed serious challenges to ASEAN member states on achieving such a target. We saw how renewable energy projects and programs must be halted amid the need to respond to the pandemic. However, we are also fortunate to see that some progress have been made as well. For example, FIT policy in Vietnam for solar power continued. Malaysia and Myanmar announced bid for solar power projects, and some green recovery measures are planned or in place. Armed with those positive progress, we are hopefully that the second half of 2020 will be positive for RE development in the region. As the region is now steadily moving towards the new normal, the question is, how could we ride this momentum to put the RE development back on track? First, countries should bear in mind that the economic recovery plan should be designed within the framework of long-term sustainability and resiliency. Second, active measures are required to support the recovery of RE market, both in supply and demand. And last, pursuing active collaboration with regional and international partners will be critical to accelerate this progress further. Ladies and gentlemen, the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Program project, or ASAP, has been here with ACE for almost 2 years, supporting ASEAN member states through various studies and activities in energy climate nexus. Allow me to express my sincerest gratitude to Ambassador Morten and the government of Norway to their continued support to ASEAN. We are pleased to learn as well that this month, August 2020, marked the 5 years Norway as sectoral dialogue partner for ASEAN. We look forward to enhancing our collaboration, and today's event will focus on 2 sets of products delivered by ACE. The first, to support ASEAN effort towards greener recovery. ACE has developed a series of analyses on RE investment tailored for each ASEAN member state. Second, to help ASEAN in understanding the impact of COVID-19. ACE has developed a series of insights in the impact of COVID-19 on energy sectors, including the RE. Please note that all of these and more are freely available from ACE and ASEP website. Setting the scene will be our partner, IRENA, sharing key messages from their global renewable outlook and post-COVID recovery report. I believe that ACE products launched today will be fruitful to the MS and insightful for all participants. I also would like to invite our stakeholders to explore further collaborative activities building upon the product that I mentioned earlier. Lastly, I hope all of you can have an enjoyable and insightful session today. Please feel free to raise your questions to our speakers and have fruitful discussion. Stay safe, of course, and sincerely, I wish you all a good health during this pandemic period. Thank you very much. Back to you, Sunny.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nuki, for such a kind words. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Morten Hockland to deliver his speech. Mr. Morten, the time is yours.
Thank you, and thank you to Dr. Nuki for your kind words and introductory remarks. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be with you today on this topic, which is very timely, very relevant, and we are very pleased that we are able to organize together with the ASEAN Center for Energy such a webinar as part of the Accept ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, which is one of our flagship projects as part of the Norway-ASEAN cooperation projects. Norway has been a sectoral dialogue partner of ASEAN for 5 years. It's almost exactly 5 years today since we signed our agreement with ASEAN. So this event is kind of an anniversary. Of course, we would like to have a big party in Jakarta or elsewhere in the region, but we have to do it online. So very happy to have such a substantial, good event taking place. And I also want to underline that we will continue to support ASEAN to enhance, in particular, on the efforts to provide a sustainable energy as part of the economic recovery. And we are in the middle of a pandemic which is affecting all of us. But still, there are many, many issues which we have to deal with on the sidelines of it's the climate crisis, it's the need for energy solutions, and the need for jobs. Of course, a lot of jobs also lost because of the pandemic. So many parallel issues we have to deal with. This webinar is trying to focus on some of this, especially how to be smarter, how to be better in terms of investing in energy and needed energy for people, for industry. I want to look, you're looking at the news headlines in the past months concerning energy. It's not been all negative, but of course the picture on investments for energy in total is that there is a less activity going on. But International Energy Agency said a couple of months ago that global energy investment was to plunge 20% amid the pandemic. But this is not specifically on the renewables. It's maybe even more related to some on the fossil fuel. And in another news, for the first time in a very, very long time, the fleet of coal-fired power stations has got smaller, with more capacity retired in the first half of 2020 than the amount open. So if we, as we do in Norway, believe that we need to phase out fossil fuels and especially coal, this is rather good news. BP, British Petroleum, just very recently on CNN announced that they will slash oil production by 40% and pour billions into green economy. So there are a lot of things happening, and in this picture, I believe it's very important that all countries, including ASEAN countries, stay competitive as they use their advantage to attract top world-class investments in modern energy solutions. And I think this is what we want to discuss, and what we want to do with this project is to make sure that the structures, the energy structures in ASEAN countries are on a level which facilitate the type of investments we like to see. It's something to do with the laws, regulation, the financial setup, but we also know that informal or more formal structures like business networks, political structures, they all play into this. And the existing structures for many countries, and this is not only for ASEAN countries, are very often benefiting traditional energy sources, fossil fuel, oil, gas, coal. So there is probably, I would say not only probably, there is most likely a need to look at structural reform. At least make sure that all energy solutions, that all types of energy have an level playing field, that there are no discriminatory structures set up against a new technology like wind, solar, and so on. And there need to be predictability. I think for any investors, what they're looking for is long-term predictability, the ability to know that the change of regulation will not be done on a 6-month basis, but they can have a long horizon when they do an investment, and transparency. So this is very much up to the political leaders, to the countries, to be ambitious and to be and to treat all new technology with an open attitude, and may the best ones win. And renewable energy for many countries is the new kid on the block. So they very often have to fight their way into the energy mix and be more creative. They have to be cheaper and so on. And this is very often also the case. But sometimes the hurdles are just too big for renewable energy to be used on a massive scale. So this has to change. And I believe the countries which can be on the front of this. They will create more jobs, they will be more competitive, and they will benefit in the long term. So I look forward to hear what the experts are saying, and I'm very pleased also with the high participation of this webinar. So thank you from my side.
Thank you, Mr. Morton, for such an excellent note on how the region should focus of the recovery plan with the renewable energy solutions. Now we will begin the first sessions that will be delivered by Miss Badaria Yosiana, Program Officer Southeast Asia in IRENA. She oversees the agency's work on supporting Southeast Asia in the development and implementations of national and regional RE strategies and programs through IRENA's regional initiative. She completed her bachelor degree in environmental engineering from Institut Teknologi Bandung and master degree also in environmental engineering from National Cheng Kung University, Taiwan. And before I give the floor to Ms. Yosi, we have the poll, which will have interaction between the audience and the speakers. The first question is, having considered COVID-19, what are the outlook of RE share in ASEAN energy mix? So the audience, we will give 30 seconds for the audience to vote for these questions, and then later on we will convey the results and begin with the discussion with Ms. Yosi. Okay, so the results, we can see that 48% have the opinion of slowdown but will accelerate, 29% slowdown but will be back to pre-pandemic level, and 5% in permanent slowdown and no particular impact. So let's discuss further with Ms. Yosi on this result. And yeah, the time is yours, Ms. Yosi.
Thank you very much, Shani. Thank you very much, ACE, for the kind invitations to be the speaker for this very important webinar. And yeah, as mentioned by Dr. Nuki and Ambassador Morton, that this spread of this pandemic has, led the disruptions of supply chains, limiting the flow of travel, trade, and investment. And I think there has been some projections from several organizations. For example, IMF, they project that the ASEAN 5 economy to contract by minus 0.6% in 2020, which is a very sharp contrast with its earlier forecast of 4.8% growth. And beyond the immediate response to the pandemic lies the bigger challenge of ensuring that the recovery pathways are channeled to building a more sustainable and prosperous future. So I'm very happy today. I will share with you some of our flagship report by IRENA on global renewables outlook and also post-COVID recovery. So IRENA Global Renewables Outlook outlines a pathway to this future. The report highlights the importance of aligning short-term recovery efforts with the medium and long-term objectives of the Paris Agreement and also the UN Sustainable Development Agenda. And it showed that the annual energy-related CO2 emissions would need to decline by 70% below today's level by 2050. And the central element of both paths is the accelerations of renewables and also efficiency measures. So the energy transformations path would cut energy-related CO2 emissions by 3.8% per year on average until 2050. And over half of these necessary reductions in emissions would come from renewable energy, both from the power and also end-use sectors, and it followed by around 1/4 from the energy efficiency. And 2/3 of global power supply would have to come from renewables by 2050. And overall, the renewables share in primary energy supply would need to rise from around 14% in 2017 to around 65% in 2050. And this would support the growing electrifications of end use, which will be critical for decarbonizations of transport, for example. Next slide, please. So while the climate change is a global threat, that transforming the energy sector involves different paths for different regions. And energy transitions plans and priorities inevitably differ from country to country. And the next few slides are some figures for Southeast Asia. So the total share of renewable energy would need to rise from around 18% of the total primary energy supply in 2017 to around 75% in 2050. And under the planned energy scenarios, this share increases to only 39%, while under the transforming energy scenario, it increases to 75%. So the renewable energy mix would change with the higher share of solar and bioenergy based on the transforming energy scenarios in 2050. And the TPS would also have to fall slightly below the planned energy scenarios due to additional efficiency measures. Next slide, please. So meeting the needs of the growing populations and energy demands, the modern renewables amounting to over 1,000 gigawatt in 2050 could provide an 85% of the region's total electricity generation capacity. The growth in renewable energy capacity represents a close to 20-fold increase from the 54 gigawatt existing in 2017. So by 2050, improved energy efficiency and the use of modern appliances will reduce energy intensity from 40 joules per year under PS to 35 per year in the transformation energy scenarios. So to bring such an outcome about would require average annual sector investment of 141 billion per year from now to 2050. While significant, this investment will generate substantial savings and help cushion the negative economic impacts of COVID-19, which is key to ASEAN's immediate and long-term prosperity and recovery. Next slide, please. So to understand the socio-economic dynamics and also an integrated approach is crucial, where the energy and economy systems are not seen as self-contained, but rather embedded into a holistic system. So IRENA has undertaken a holistic approach that links the energy system and also the economies within a single and consistent quantitative framework and analyzes variables such as GDP, employment, and welfare. Next slide, please. So under the IRENA transforming energy scenario, the region is estimated to benefit both in the short and long terms. With targeted investment and also supportive policy measures, the regional GDP of Southeast Asia will improve by an average of 1.5% until 2023. And in the long term, the region is estimated to have an additional growth compared to the planned energy scenario at an average rate of 3.2% until 2050. And in cumulative terms, the regions will add additional 5.6 trillion US dollars up to 2050 to their economy compared to business as usual. Next slide, please. So comparing our transforming energy scenario with business as usual, net gains in relative terms compared to total jobs are highest in Southeast Asia, so making the regions with the largest employment gains. So this is a very positive news. So in the context of Southeast Asia, energy sector jobs reach 10.5 million, and this is a net increase of 4.7 million compared to the planned energy scenarios. So if we compare between the transforming energy scenarios and the planned energy scenarios, so the jobs in renewable energy will increase by 4.7 million, and it will reach 6.7 million. This is triple the jobs estimated in the planned energy scenarios. And the jobs in energy efficiency will increase by around 25%, and it will reach around 0.7 million. And in the power grid and flexibility sector related jobs, it will increase by around 0.2 million compared to the planned energy scenarios, and it will reach to 0.6 million. And 0.3 million jobs will be lost in fossil fuel, reaching to 2.4 million in 2050. Next slide, please. So as mentioned in my previous slide, that the jobs in renewables will be tripled, reaching to 6.7 million in transforming energy scenarios. And so the bioenergy will create over half of the jobs in the sector, thanks to all the initiatives in the regions and also the employment intensive nature of the technology. I know that, for example, the Indonesia government has been very aggressive lately towards the bioenergy sector. And then the solar energy jobs reach 1.88 million, which is over 5 times the job estimated in the planned energy scenarios. While in hydro sector, the jobs will increase by 84%, reaching to 0.28 million. Next slide, please. So the policymakers need to recognize how many renewable energy jobs can be created along each segment of the value chain. So the policymakers can design a green recovery programs that maximize regional and national value creations. The renewable energy draws on a wide variety of occupational groups and skill sets, and thus it provides job opportunities to many people. So from the project planning and development to the manufacturing of equipment and components, from constructions and installations to operations and maintenance. So renewable energy projects entail a broad range of activities and thus offer considerable potential. And Southeast Asia can expect significant employment gains, in part because countries in the regions have strong local content requirements, such as Indonesia. Next slide, please. So the welfare in Southeast Asia will substantially improve thanks to the energy transformations, and welfare under transforming energy scenarios improves faster and further than under the planned energy scenarios, with a 3.2% improvement in 2030 and 11.2% improvement in 2050. And the social and environmental dimensions predominate, reflecting the significant improvements in health obtained by curbing air pollutions and also reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. So talking about the policies, so the investment alone will not achieve the necessary structural shift. So the policy measures are equally, if not more important in this regard. And there are a number of important policy measures elaborated in our report, but I will mention some of the key recommendations. Number one, on ambitions. So the countries need to raise their national targets and enhance NDCs and also the energy transition related plans. Number two is public intervention. So steer investment away from fossil fuels and make bailouts condition on climate actions. Number three, on the energy transition related in all sectors, including power, transport, heating, and cooling. So safeguard existing renewable energy projects and ensure stable policy frameworks for the transitions related infrastructure. Number four is employment. So to support the workforce expansion in energy transitions related fields, and also to develop and training and educations to minimize skill gaps and reskill workers from the fossil fuel industries. And number five is industry. So it's very important to diversify supply chain and also to develop local industries, because due to this pandemic, the supply chains are pretty much disrupted. And number six is access. It's also important to support the distributed renewable energy solutions to strengthen health, sanitation, and other critical infrastructures, especially in the remote area. Next slide, please. So to move towards a transformative decarbonizations of societies, unwavering commitments from governments, the private sector, and civil society are required. To ensure the ongoing expansions of the renewable energy industry, continued support measures should be provided to facilitate deployment and also related measures to facilitate the integrations of renewables into energy distribution systems and end-use application. and also to provide sufficient system flexibility as variable renewables grow in importance. And the successful stimulus and recovery packages call for policy cohesions and also increased international cooperations. Strengthen and multilateralism will help mobilize necessary resources to address the current crisis in ways that are consistent with long-term climate and sustainability needs. And I think I'll come to my last slide. Next slide, please. So yeah, these are some of our reports on socioeconomic impact analysis. The one that I've just mentioned is the newest one, which are the global renewables and the global renewables outlook and also post-COVID recovery. And you could download it for free in IRENA's website. And that will be all for my presentations, and I look forward to have lively discussions after my fellow speakers deliver their presentations. Thank you so much, Shani. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Josie, for such an excellent presentations. Before we go to the next agenda, I would like to ask one question specifically for you. Looking at the IRENA's projection, RE and EE are still the key to achieve the energy transformation globally as well as in ASEAN. However, looking at the current situation of the COVID-19 pandemic impacts, the economy are degrowth and the energy sector are obviously hit hard. Could you comment how far the impact of COVID and degrowth of the economy influencing the IRENA outlook projections? And maybe could you share with us the key actions that the government are needed to so that we are still be on the track of the projection?
Okay, thank you so much for the questions. So yeah, for our post-COVID recovery reports, we look both short-term and long-term. And long-term, of course, until 2030 and 2050, but short-term we look until 2023. So the recovery measures over the next 3 years, it's very important because it can either trigger a decisive shift toward resilient energy systems, or it will ensure enduring lock-in with unsustainable practices. So a holistic policy approach rooted in the climate-safe energy development, yet also focus on short-term imperatives would reap multiple benefits and help set the stage for a just transitions. And as I mentioned, that we cannot separate between the energy and economy aspects, so it needs to be a holistic and integrated policy approach. And also, so the renewable energy projects, including the existing utility scale plants and those under constructions, distributed generations investment, and also the renewables ready network infrastructures, it must be safeguarded. And when we're talking about, for example, the energy investment that is undertaken as a short-term response to the pandemic's effects, it could also support increasingly ambitious longer-term targets for renewables and efficiency in all sectors, as well as reinforce enhanced climate pledges.
Okay, thank you for the answer. We are looking forward to further discussions later. Okay, so before we go to the next speaker, I want to reiterate the purpose of this webinar. So this is launching talk is actually platform for ACE to launch its product. This time, accept products that is jointly contributed by ACE and the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs, or NUPI. We have published 10 ASEAN Policy Briefs for our investment series to support the ASEAN efforts toward the green recovery. You could see that the QR code there. So if you are interested and to access it, just scan the QR code later. Okay, so we will go to the next speaker. So our next speaker is Dr. Roman Fokulchuk. He is a senior research fellow of NUPI. And he holds PhD degree in economics from Jacob University Bremen in Germany. And he served as a project leader and expert in research project organized by Inter Alia, the ADB, GDN, and others well-known research institute. So good morning, Dr. Fakucuk.
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah. Just before you start, I would like to invite the audience to have a poll again. Please, the questions is, please rate the development of RE investment environment in your country for the last 3 years. We would like to hear from the audience of their opinion about the RE investment during this COVID-19 pandemics. Yeah. So the result is, it's almost 50-50. 43% say that there is enough progress, but more is required, and 44% say that there is a lack of progress. 5% regress and 9% satisfactory progress. So let's hear from Dr. Roman about the RE investment. The time is yours.
Thank you very much, Nadila. And good morning, good afternoon, probably also good evening to some of the attendees. I must say it's a big pleasure to be part of the panel with esteemed speakers. And I think it's also for the first time that I ever been to such a big panel, but event in terms of the number of attendees, which I see is more than 380 participants, which is great because we can have a big outreach of the research that we've done. And I will be talking about the results, the main results of the 10 policy briefs that Nadila has just mentioned, which are based on our research project, where we try to look at the investment climate for renewable energy, and in particular, we try to understand the investment climate and some of the key challenges, also some of the key achievements over the last 10 and 15 years. So in a sense, we started our work before the pandemic, and we finished it during the pandemic. So I hope that our results will reflect upon sort of some of the macro trends, but they will also be relevant to the situation that has emerged now with this pandemic. So let me move to the first slide, which is, so basically today I will talk about some of the specific measures that we think are relevant. And as you can see in these 10 policy briefs, we have a specific and country-specific action plans, how countries can attract more investment in renewable energy. So we propose some concrete measures that we think would be conducive to attracting more investment, both in the short term, but also in the long run. So a few words about the general background. What we know about the recent years is that, well, there has been a substantial increase in terms of the global investment in renewable energy. And the competition for renewable energy and for investment in renewables has been also growing in many countries. So that you can get sort of the perspective, back in 2006, the total global investment in renewable energy was $89 billion, and it increased to $272.9 billion by 2018, which is a 206% growth. So we all know that, well, also the investment in renewable have also exceeded the total investment in fossil fuels around 5 years ago. At the same time, what is interesting is that back in the years of 2000, the major growth took place in the developed countries. However, after 2010, developing countries have been at the front of sort of the investment success, and many of the developing countries in Asia, in particular, have been very successful in attracting investment and developing renewable energy. And you can also look at the numbers: 513% increase total in terms of the attracted investment in the developing countries. compared to the 93% in developed ones. So while there has been this clear trend in terms of the developing countries, what we also found is that the ASEAN countries have been largely excluded from this global trend. Well, first, we know that ASEAN has set a target of 23% of renewable energy in its energy mix by 2025. And in order to achieve this number, ASEAN needs to attract $27 billion in renewable energy from 2019 onwards, so basically up to 2025. And against this background, we see that in 2018, ASEAN attracted $7.4 billion. So it means that there's a sort of investment deficit in terms of the projections, in terms of the plans to achieve the target. If we'll take a look at the graph that shows total investment in renewable energy in all ASEAN countries over time, we can see that there has been indeed some increase. You can see judging by the numbers, that overall we can see some slow, but still there was an increase in terms of the attracted investment. And in particular, the year 2018 stands out as a particularly successful year, but this was largely due to the individual success of Vietnam, which attracted $5.2 billion alone, which means that all other 9 countries taken together, they attracted much less than Vietnam. So, but overall, we can say that, well, there has been some success, and we should also note that, well, in some areas in particular that I will be talking about now, we should note some progress. And in particular, what we found in our research is that we can say that the ASEAN has managed to achieve a notable progress in terms of adopting legislation that is based on the best policy practices and also based on sort of best regulations. If you look at the table that's on your slide, you can see that there are 2 types of so-called best practices in terms of the regulatory policies and also in terms of the fiscal incentives and public financing. So overall, ASEAN as a region has pretty much been among the leaders in terms of the adopted legislation that is based on these best practices when it comes to setting renewable energy targets, introducing feed-in tariffs and auctions. So especially some of the countries have been more successful than the others. So you can see, for example, Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand have been more successful, and they basically have been actively cooperating with big international organizations, big donors, including the Asian Development Bank, the World Bank, also IRENA, and many others. So in that regard, we can say that, well, legislation that sort of used to potentially can attract investment and raise some interest among the investors has been very much actively promoted in the region. The next slide also shows us the regulatory indicators for sustainable energy, which is the index developed by the World Bank. It shows that actually, if you look at the different dimensions required for the promotion of renewable energy, you will also see that this green light shows that green color shows that most of the ASEAN countries have a legal framework in place. So this 100% means basically 100 out of 100 points. Also, there has been some progress in terms of the planning for renewable energy expansion. So you see these first 2 dimensions. Also, we should say a few words about the counterparty risks, which is the dimension number 6, which also shows that, well, ASEAN countries have been quite successful in terms of adopting necessary fiscal measures, adopting necessary protection measures, and also the insurance measures for investors. Yet, if you look at the most successful country, which is Vietnam, it's ranked number 32. So you can see this position in the ranking in the red color out of 132 countries that this index covers. And Myanmar, as you can see, is ranked 111. And what does it tell us? It tells us that, well, despite this substantial progress in terms of adopting necessary legislation and regulatory fiscal measures, well, ASEAN is not really unique because many countries in the world have been moving in the same direction. And in 2018, 146 countries had actually renewable energy targets. Also, 138 countries established support policies, and 113 passed national renewable energy laws. And if we talk about the competition, if we come back to the first slide in terms of the global race for renewable energy investment, we can say, well, that adopting legislation and, for example, different feed-in tariffs or auction mechanisms is no longer a sufficient factor to attract investment or like to raise investors' interest. Well, it can actually raise some interest, but only short-term, because what investors are really looking for are some more long-term institutional support of what they're doing. And we can also say a few words about Vietnam's success story is that it's very much based on the fact that Vietnam managed to consolidate its efforts domestically and to channel efforts and also to sort of pay a lot of attention to help investors enter the market and also try to provide support for the implementation of the feed-in tariffs in the first place. But now also we know that Vietnam is looking into the auction mechanisms. So in a sense, well, Vietnam's success story is based on this multi-level and comprehensive support by the government and also by the institutional support. So while having all these positive trends in ASEAN, I think it's also important to underline that there's still a number of important challenges and some big barriers that limit investment in the region. And first of all, and this is probably one of the major, I would say, barriers that we at Norwegian Institute of International Affairs and also our colleagues at ACE in Indonesia found is that, well, there's limited governance capacity to promote renewable energy. So I would say that, well, the pace of catching up with this advanced legislation has been quite slow in terms of the governance and institutional reform. While from the point of view of the investor, it's very important that there are relevant institutions built in order to support and implement this advanced legislation. Also, there's an issue of the limited human resources and still weakly developed financial markets. So against this background in terms of the key challenges that the region is facing going forward in terms of attracting investment, what we propose in our policy brief, and this is the common measures. Of course, all countries are very individual, and some countries are, can be classified according to different criteria and groups according to the success that they achieved so far. Still, there's a number of lessons and actions that are relevant to all countries. And one of the key, I would say, measures that is very important in the long term, and this is also, again, it's both relevant to the time during the pandemic, but also just going beyond the pandemic. I think it's very crucial for countries, if they really get serious about promoting renewable energy, is to initiate governance reform in favor of renewable energy. And one of the very concrete measures is to set up a Ministry of Renewable Energy, or to establish a high-ranking institution, not necessarily a ministry, but still a very important and big institution that would be responsible and taking more responsibility for promoting renewables in the country. And I could give you just one example of Indonesia and the governance structure there, but this is also relevant to all other countries in the region. And it's relevant in the sense that in all countries we have small government units that are responsible for renewable energy. So which means that the main energy ministries, they assign different tasks to different smaller agencies, and usually it's from 2 to 4 small government agencies that coordinate the implementation of renewable energy policies. So, which means that the scope for their, scope of their responsibility, also scope for sort of the promoting the renewable energy policies has been quite limited. So it's really important to expand the role of renewable energy in the government system. And this is also what Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Höglund mentioned in the first place, is that there should be some even playing field in terms of the fossil fuels and renewable energy in order to have some more progress with renewables. So, and there are many countries that have introduced and have actually expanded the role of renewable energy governance in their systems. For example, countries like India, Australia, also Egypt, Mauritius, and they offer some of the very interesting lessons is that once you establish an important government institution that is solely focused on promoting renewable energy, in the long term, this will have the following benefits. This can lead to gain for this ministry or institution to gain more power, resources, and autonomy. It also means more independent decision-making. Overall, in the long term, it means more effective governance of renewables, faster capacity building. Also, this is very important, as also was mentioned by Ms. Luciana, this capacity building aspect of promoting renewables in the region. It can also lead to high concentration of skilled human resources, better awareness raising. This can also be quite instrumental in terms of mobilizing private sector investment. Also for international investors, this can send a signal that, well, the country is becoming very aware and also very serious about promoting renewable at a large scale. So of course this often correlates, establishing such an institution in some of the countries that I named, this correlates well with attracting investment in the long term. That's why I think it's a very important measure. In addition to it, it's also important to build capacity in all different layers in terms of the governing, the renewables. And here I think probably Ms. Luciana would basically agree is that, well, IRENA has the resources to provide support. So in that regard, I think that many of the member states could request more targeted support for developing their specific needs in terms of the capacity for renewable energy governance. Also, I think renewables need to be prioritized in the regulatory framework so that they have as much weight, or maybe even more weight in terms of being prioritized compared to fossil fuels. I think it's also important and relevant to all countries in the region is that market entry in many ways is still complicated. So I think one of the ways to attract investments could be to facilitate and make market entry quite easy. Also, I think mobilizing domestic investors should be also an important and concrete step for the governments of the region to really try to attract as much investment as possible. Because, in the end, both domestically and internationally, there has been no shortage of capital in terms of, for example, energy investment. Now, I think it's the task to really try to reorient it towards more green energy. And finally, it's still, of course, although much has been done, and also with the support of big international organizations, it's still there's still many ways on how to improve bankability of renewable energy projects in the region. So these are the main and general actions that are relevant to all countries. And for some more individual actions and policy recommendations, you can go again and check each individual country and the policy briefs that we published. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Roman, for a very insightful highlight on the 10 ASEAN policy brief that we just launched. I have an overarching questions. In pre-pandemic era, like you said, the global investment favors more towards RE and less to the coal and other fossil fuels, like you mentioned before earlier in your slide. We know that big banks also quitting to finance new coal projects and etc. In ASEAN, we also see a successful RE investment, such as in Vietnam. But however, COVID-19 brings a unique challenge to RE. As we know, the oil price and coal price now are very low. In your opinion, does this situation poses a quite threat for the RE investment in post-pandemic era for ASEAN region? And maybe could you recommend to the ASEAN government how to keep the RE investing climate to be conducive regarding these competitions with low price of oil and coal?
Thank you, Nadila, for the very important question. Well, I think there are several aspects in my response to it that I will touch upon. Well, first, I think the pandemic offers quite a unique opportunity for many governments, and not only in the ASEAN region but globally, to take some unpopular decisions that would be very important in the long term, and that can really provide with more opportunities for developing, for example, green energy or promoting renewable energy. And these measures would have been more difficult to take before the pandemic, but the crisis, really offers an opportunity, because now governments really need to decide between different options, which policy side to take, right? In terms of the going more for, as you said, fossil fuels that are traded at a low price at the moment, or consider more maybe more less affordable options in terms of green energy. But I think if we look at it from the point of view of a long-term perspective, for the period of for 15, 20, 25 years from now, we can say clearly that, well, sort of opting out for the green energy provides more kind of benefits, can provide more benefits and opportunities in the long term, because it has less risks compared to investing in fossil fuels. And again, this example of the Mr. Höglund's that he gave about the BP taking a decision to cut its oil production. We also know about the several global initiatives in terms of, for example, the EU's this carbon border tax, which can be also quite important in terms of the global trade and also global energy relations, and which also carries a lot of financial risks in the long-term perspective. So I think now it's really the time to try to think into, okay, what can be done in the short-term perspective with kind of the least negative impact. And I think, well, many countries are still combining, in many ways, fossil fuels with renewable energy. But I think in terms of the long-term perspective, it's clearly, there's probably the only ways to really opt for the renewable energy solutions and green energy, different types of energy mix, and also sources of renewable energy. Also because it has clear economic benefits. So in that regard, again, probably in order to design the right policies, I think there should be even more than before the pandemic, there should be more regional cooperation. Plus, there should be very active cooperation with international donors on sort of designing the right policies. Because again, as I said, it's probably now the time and when it's easier to adopt them and to carry them through, sort of facing less sort of opposition maybe from the society at large. And also, I think in the end, also all those benefits that Ms. Yusiana has mentioned, it was also very important, like all the clear benefits in terms of the employment, in terms of the kind of opportunities combating climate change that green energy brings. I think they all speak for the fact that, well, renewable energy should be prioritized in the long term.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Roman, for addressing the questions. Now, I'd like to invite the third speaker of our webinar, Dr. Zulfikar Yurnedi. He is a Senior Officer of Sustainable Energy, Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Department, also Senior Research Analyst of the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project. Hello, Dr. Zulfikar. And prior to ACE, he was a researcher in Green Technology Center, Korea, and also taught several classes in Ajo University. In ACCEP, Zulfikar conducts research and cooperation activities to inject climate change perspective in ASEAN region and improve the linkage between the two. So before we begin with your presentation, we would like to hear the last poll for from the audience. Yeah, the questions is the impact of COVID-19 to renewable energy sector in Q2 compared to Q1 is a lot worse, no change, better, or a lot better. So let's hear from the audience what are their perspective of the impact of COVID in Q2 compared to Q1. Yeah. So 43% said that the impact in Q2 is worse, 43%, and then 27% believe that there's no change, and then 18% says it's better in Q2 compared to Q1, and 9% say it a lot worse, and 3% says a lot better. So this is a very interesting result. Let me get back to Dr. Zulfikar for the further explanation what happened in Q2 in terms of impact of COVID in renewable energy. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Shani, for introducing the last session for today, because we are having the Q&A session. So what I am about to present today is part of the studies conducted by ACE, initiated by ACCEP, but we also have help from many colleagues of ACE, which is in order for us to be able to assist the policymakers and stakeholders in the Southeast Asia. We actually developed a special page on COVID-19 in our website, in which we try to gather the news, the policy responses, and based on that, we develop analysis in form of articles like op-eds, blog articles, policy brief, as well as the insights. So one of our key products from that analysis is what we call the energy insights, specifically on the impact of COVID-19 to the energy sectors in ASEAN. And we have three types of energy insights. First is for electricity, oil and gas. The third one is for the renewable. So today I will try to share to you what are the insights that we can gather from our analysis. So before that, just a brief explanation about ACCEP for those who has not know about it yet. So it's a 3 years project supported by the Norwegian under the Norwegian ASEAN Regional Integration Program. And basically we tried to make a higher coherence between the policy of energy and climate, as well as regional and national policy in the region. So just briefly show you what is going on with all of this pandemic in the region. So in the left table, you can see that this is the number of cases, deaths, and also tests of the COVID-19 in the region for each country. Please understand that the data is actually from the end of last month, of 31st July, and the numbers are increasing right now. But what's interesting in here, we can also see the index case, like how the pandemic comes into the regions, as you might know already, starting from Thailand, Cambodia, and some countries are not impacted until March, such as Myanmar, Indonesia, and also Brunei. But it's huge now. We have a total of 7,000 deaths in the regions, and it has a severe impact to the whole sectors, mainly the economy. And on the right-hand side, you can see that several predictions on the COVID-19 impacted growth projection in 2020-2021 for countries. And it's mostly say that there will be a recession, a very slow growth. And we also get the news that in the Q2, various countries in the region recorded negative growth, economic growth year by year, including Indonesia and others. And I also, sorry. So the first thing that we did actually when we are faced in this pandemic is we actually did a survey for our policymakers, and actually it's we conducted the study for broad audiences to see what their impressions on COVID-19 impacts on energy and climate change. So we see that sector-wise, the impact is mostly in transportation and industry sectors, followed by commercials. And interestingly, this is also somehow in line with the energy used by sector in the regions, which is dominated by industry and transportation, followed by commercial. We also see that at that time, March, the news about impacts of COVID-19 to the energy is mostly on the fossil fuels. Low energy price, some losses in the countries that depend a lot on fossil fuel sales and others. And it's also shown in our survey here that 68% says that it will impacting fossil fuel. But we also see that a lot of people think that renewable energy will be impacted as well. And we also see in this slide, I would like to show you what was going on in the region before the pandemic hits the regions. So basically, this is news collected from 2019, as far as I remember, and we see that actually the region has been gearing up, was gearing up towards our acceleration. There are very good innovative policies in our member states, in ASEAN member states, such as in Vietnam, which is feed-in tariffs for solar, with their feed-in tariffs for wind. And we saw that in 2019, they break a lot of records in terms of solar power installations in the region. And they are starting to become one of the powerhouse of renewable energy in the region. We also see that the solar rooftop has been pushing quite a lot in the regions, including in Indonesia. We saw countries are considering and implementing floating solar power in the regions, including in Thailand, in Indonesia, and of course also in Vietnam. But what happened is that the COVID-19 hit the region starting from January to March, as we mentioned. And in addition to its impact to the oil sectors, because low demand and low energy price, it also impacted a lot the renewable energy. There are several lines that we can see the reasons behind that negative impact, but a lot of reasons coming from the supply chain disruptions, which leads to postpone our projects. As you might know that in the beginning, there are a lot of movement restrictions, and the countries in the region, they depend a lot on supply chains from abroad, mainly China, for the equipments, but sometimes also including the human power they need from abroad, and the limitation of movement of goods and people on that time really hit the region in terms of renewable energy projects. We see that in Laos, in Cambodia, hydropower projects were postponed or suspended, and the Philippines, they have a delay on their solar commissioning. And in Malaysia, the palm oil industries have been hit, and it impacts also the biofuel. And there is also in Thailand, they have to do new PPA agreements with their neighboring countries. And in Indonesia, they start to re-evaluate the geothermal development in the country. Second thing that we notice is some news still keeping the hopes of renewables alive, even while they are trying to responding to the pandemic. Like in Vietnam, they keep discussing about the second feed-in tariff, which was ended last year. And in Malaysia, we saw that there is an interesting article about the community social-based renewable energy installation in the region, which we believe can be very beneficial to the regions. And after that, we also see that the regions, the countries are trying to see how they can shape our industry post the pandemic. And a lot of news analysis that says, okay, our sector will be one of the sectors that can create bigger jobs in the future. And they also say that governments can do green stimulus package, but this is, as you might remember, is still in the beginning of the pandemic. And we also see that Malaysia was quite passed in terms of planning stimulus package, which includes some activities in solar panel installations. And so that's until March. And from Q2, what we see is that RE development is still pushed back. There's a lot of still news related to delay in projects. Like for example, in Indonesia, it's reported that the demand of the photovoltaic panels has been decreased. In commercial, it's decreased like 70%. In residential, it decreased like almost 100%. And Indonesia also plan to delay their aggressive strategy of B40 and B100. The same with Malaysia, they try to postpone the B20 biodiesel program rollout. And overall, there are news that say around 150 gigawatts of renewables in Asia Pacific, not only in ASEAN, would be at risk. But we also see, on the other hand, countries continue to show resiliency in terms of RE deployment, of course, amid the new normal rollout, which has started, I think, from May onwards. Countries are starting to opening the economic activities, and this also has some positive impact to the renewable energy sectors. Like, for example, we see that in Indonesia, there are new grants from the ADB for 2 new geothermal power plants. Vietnam, again, they finally released the second feed-in tariff, start from early April. And they're also considering to extend their wind projects in light of the impact from the COVID-19 until 2021. And basically, what we see in the Q2, there are a lot of discussions and policy studies, as well as strategies that tries to see that the countries do not lose sight of the long-term green recovery. So when they are designing their recovery and stimulus package, they should still ensuring that sustainable pathways are taken, including keep pursuing of RE. We see that in Thailand, they pour 30 billion baht for Energy for All scheme. And what we also see in here, that some funding coming from abroad. This is what we say, that when the international and regional cooperation will be important for the regions, like the IFC, they plan to boost the funding for off-grid solar power in Myanmar, and the Philippines. Locally, the central bank mentioned that they will support for energy transition and renewables. So there are some political will over there. And for ASEAN, the Southeast Asia Clean Energy Facility, which is handled by some philanthropics, already gathered 10 million of fund, with additional 40 million fund in the pipeline. So in essence, this is what are our intakes for the renewable energy impacted by COVID-19 from Q1 for Q2. So from the survey and then what happened in Q1, what happened in the Q2, we see that in the Q1 there are a lot of I mean, people are starting to react, to respond to this pandemic. The supply chain basically stopped, logistics stopped. They have difficulties on doing the renewable. But starting from Q2, struggles is there. We noticed that the lack of renewable energy projects actually impacted the renewable energy companies. Some need to do layoffs, some even closed, out of business. But countries still trying to show the resiliency of the renewable energy and how to keep pushing the renewable energy policy, strategies, and plans despite the pandemic. And we also see that there are a lot of opinions that we still have to wait and to see. But there are a lot of opinions out there that say, okay, this is the time to reorient the economy for renewable energy development. And a little bit of sneak peek of H2 2020. So we passed July, and there are several news that we see quite positive, that in the Philippines there are news about prosumers. When the solar installation can sell electricity back to the grid, there are planned to shift around 17 gigabyte of the currently planned coal power plants to natural gas and REs. And in Malaysia, we see that the Petronas, the oil and gas state-owned companies, start to invest in the solar energy startup. In general, in terms of investment, building upon the previous presentation, we see that global financing actually become tightened in general outside of a grant type or a cheap loan type of finance. The finance become tightened, and at the same time, the local banks quite reluctant to finance renewable energy capacity. But the government probably can help to provide incentives for financial institutions and investors so that they can finance renewable energy projects, which is built inside a framework of a stimulus package for economic recovery. And last, to assist you, as I mentioned again, to see what will happen of COVID-19 impacts to renewable energy in other sectors in the regions. We will keep updating our page on COVID-19 with news, updates, and insights. And we also plan to keep updating our energy insight for Q3 and Q4. So please wait for it. Thank you very much. And that's from me. Back to you, Shani.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Zulfikar, for highlighting the findings of the ACE COVID-19 series. However, I have one specific questions for you. We see a lot has happened in Q1 and in Q2 due to the COVID impact to the ASEAN energy sector, and in the first half of the 2020, in the next half of 2020, what are your expectations that will be happen, especially in RE? You mentioned that there is a positive vibe about the countries keeping their targets and actions towards RE, but could you share maybe another insights on it?
Okay, yeah, that's actually a very good question, and I'm not like future is quite difficult to see basically, but looking at the news and the trend, we see that we are quite positive that there will be more positive news on renewable energy in the second half, but it remains to see. I think one of the most important factor is that the COVID-19 is not going away very soon. Countries that try to open economies sees so that the number of COVID-19 cases increasing, and it might also lead to little more restrictions in the activities, including renewable energy activities. But what we saw from the news is that there are like positive how can I say, mindsets in terms of, okay, let's keep pushing energy transition. So the homework and the question is coming to the policymakers and other stakeholders, whether they are ready, willing and ready to create the good environment so that this positive mindset can be grown into a real action. So I think it's still to see what would be the policymakers' decisions and how it will impact the renewable energy market in the regions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your answer. Now I think we are ready for the Q&A sessions with all of the speakers. We have a lot of questions, but basically I will choose two first questions to be addressed by all the speakers. First is, there is a questions, I think this one is intended for Mr. Dr. Roman. Yeah. How do you think the major oil and gas companies can help to accelerate the energy transitions and the deployment of renewable energy? And can we expect a substantial investment coming from them after the pandemics?
Thank you to the audience for being so active and for the good question. Well, I think the major oil and gas companies can indeed play a very important role in supporting and accompanying the transition to renewable energy. And just I think a few days ago, I've seen in the news that in Malaysia, some of the oil and gas companies are willing to increase support and to increase investment in renewable energy projects. And I think also the global oil and gas companies that operate in ASEAN region can also do more in terms of providing incentives and also increasing their investment in the renewable energy sector. Yet I think while their support is very important, I don't think it's sufficient. In that regard, it's really important that there's full and comprehensive support from the government, also from the renewable energy companies that are not that have not really operated and that were kind of established as part of the renewable energy framework. So I think the common and consolidated efforts from all the market players are very important.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Roman. Any other speakers want to top this comment? No? Okay, so I think we'll go to the second question. This one is intended to Ms. Yosi from the Energy Studies Institute. The question is, may I know what do you think of the role of carbon capture and storage as part of the ASEAN countries' recovery plan and energy transition?
Thank you very much for the questions. Well, when we're talking about the CCS, I think it's one of the promising technology, but I mean currently it still needs to be, there has been a pilot project in several countries, and some of them shows quite a good result, but I think it still takes some times to be able for full implementation. So I think for the short term kind of like recovery, when we're talking about under this context, I still think it will need sometimes, especially for the ASEAN regions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Yosi. Another speakers want to top this comment about CCS as a recovery plan for the ASEAN? Okay. I think we can go to the next questions. I think for this one, it's for all of the three speakers. Does the development of RE have bright prospect after the pandemic, remembering that many countries experience negative economic growth, while RE usually requires very high investment in the capital? I think I'd like to start with Dr. Zulfikar to address these questions, and then followed by the others.
Okay, thank you. Just a slight comment about the CCS. It is true that it's still far away in the future, but what can be done as part of this post-pandemic activities is that maybe we can start pouring some attention for the research types of CCS, so that when the technology is ready and should be implemented, whether we like it or not in the region, we will be ready. So I think that would be some short comments on the CCS. And on the whether the renewable energy will have a bright future in terms, because the GDP economic will be reduced. I think, yeah, to be honest, it will be quite difficult for renewable energy to find ways in the economic contraction like this normally, but with proper policies, proper strategies and measures from the government, as well as strong cooperation in the region, I think it is still possible for renewable energy to do some acceleration in the future. As mentioned before, it is true that currently, in terms of financing, both global and local, they have some, they are kind of risk averse in terms of investing in renewable energy. And we see that this is probably a good chance for the government to as I mentioned before, keep thinking about the long-term sustainability and put financial or fiscal incentives for renewable energy financing by pushing the local financial institutions, providing them with incentives to invest in the renewable energy. So to sum it short, normally it's difficult, but it's not impossible, and we need to urge the government to design the policy specifically for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the answers. Maybe Dr. Roman want to share your opinion on this?
Yeah, I agree and share the analysis of Dr. Yurnaidi, in a sense that it says, yes, it's difficult at the moment, but it's not really impossible. And again, I would like to emphasize the fact that by improving and substantially improving the investment climate for renewable energy, by promoting coherent and consistent policies that really favor the investment in renewable energy, also by providing very transparent investment climate, and also by ensuring predictability in terms of the investment made, and basically supporting the investors. I think this is the area where it's possible to have some immediate effects, and also to ensure investment from the big investors in the long-term perspective. So I would say that it's really the time to focus on improving the investment climate, and also trying to build the resilience towards renewable energy and sort of green energy in the long-term perspective.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Roman. Ms. Yosi, you want to also have opinion on this?
Yeah, so I think it's also important that it's important to safeguard the renewable energy projects which might facing a construction delay. So perhaps the government could give deadlines extensions or waive penalties and facilitate agreements with the off-takers. And it's also important to speed up the authorizations and permitting procedures that might that might cause some delays during this pandemic situations. And it's also important to maintain the investments in the planned projects, so to make sure that there will be no cancellations. So to reassure the market players about the commitments to the existing plans, and also to assert commitments to the procurement plans, and communicate revised plans with transparency. I agree with Dr. Roman. And also to mitigate the risk, like for example the curtailment, and also the currency exchange, and also to allocate more evenly between the relevant parties. Thank you, Shani.
Okay, thank you for all the answers from the speakers. I think the time limitation doesn't allow us to go for any more questions, but however, all the questions that being asked to the speakers will be answered later after the webinar, as we will send a follow-up email and the reportage of this webinar. Also with all answer to the questions. We also will share all the presentation materials that is being shared today. Lastly, I think I would like to thank all the speakers, Dr. Zulfikar, Dr. Roman, and also Ms. Yosi, for sparing your valuable time and sharing the valuable insights to all of us here. Thank you for that. It's very highly appreciated. I also want to thank you for all the attendees for attending and very active in asking the questions during the webinar. And lastly, could we go to the next slide? Yeah. Maybe I would like to remind you again that we have a special page on COVID-19 under our Accept website. So every one of you that is interested to observe what are the current situations of the ASEAN energy sector during the pandemic could access this page. Next. Yeah, I would like to also inform that under the Accept, we have the ASEAN Researcher Network on Energy and Climate Change, or we call it ARNEC, which is a network among the researcher, government, and other energy communities that is interested in energy and climate change in the region. So if you are interested to see and know more about this, please go to the link below. Yeah, I think we have very good sessions today with almost 300 and more people that stays through the webinar. I think it's very exciting to share with all of you. I think we will see you hopefully in the next webinar. Thank you very much for all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.